You are watching Life on Gabriola TV, community television, for you, by you.
Welcome to part 2 of our interview with Islands Trust Trustees Tobi Elliott and Susan Yates about the review of Gabriola's official community plan that's just getting underway. In this segment, we continue our discussion of affordable housing on the island, then move on to the current engagement process in which you can get involved, and also talk about just how effective the OCP really is in guiding our planning. If you'd like to watch part 1, you'll find it on the Facebook page of the Life on Gabriola Media Society. And now, here's part 2.
The current plan also contains a provision introduced, I think, quite recently to it by way of an amendment to allow for multiple dwelling affordable housing, but it says to be permitted for special needs residents, seniors 60 years of age or older, and low to moderate income families. What about young people who may want to stay here, may want to come here, and who may want to work here in our businesses? Can we make an accommodation so that that becomes more possible?
Please. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we need to work on rental things here, Frank.
Well, and
we need to talk about land sharing, and co-ops, but we also need to talk about short-term vacation rentals. Why are some of them not long-term rentals for people who work in the very businesses, that we really need on Gabriola Island? I can tell you right now, I sort of keep my own running spreadsheet of short-term vacation rentals on, and I don't mean B&Bs. B&Bs are wonderful for this community. I mean short-term vacation rentals. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at that list and thinking about 15 of those would make ideal rentals long-term for people who are working in some of the commercial accommodation, the restaurants, the health clinic, the village. Young families, young people particularly, oh no, they're commuting. They're having to commute back and forth from Nanaimo because they can't find a place to rent. So, it's really hard to convince people who are building and buying on Gabriola that would make an ideal long-term rental for somebody. But I wanted to comment also on the large lots because there are large lot landholders on this island and other islands who are excellent land stewards. Yeah. And in fact, their large lots, 5 acres, 10 acres, are wonderful ecosystem preservation places. But you can't count on that with zoning. You just can't count on that because
with real estate being bought and sold, it's the biggest commodity in Canada.
You can only count on that if those people do not clear cut their 10 acres and do not put in 3 different driveways and do not build a 4,000 square foot home. If they live modestly and care for their environment, then a private land, large lot can be a really good thing. But you can't regulate.
But the problem is land is scarce and real estate sales will only continue to climb. We live on an island. And so as that scarce commodity, because we've commodified land, becomes ever more tight, who is going to be able to afford 5-acre lots? Increasingly, we're going to see a population that could gentrify. So we need to have the conversation about, can we densify? Can we increase the number of houses or dwellings on smaller lots? Because young families, back to your question, that's probably what they can afford. Maybe 2 young families can get together to buy a small lot, but if you can only have 1 dwelling on it or whatever, it's going to be challenging. So how do we increase density on small lots without depreciating the environmental protection?
Right. I'm thinking too of young people who do not have a family yet or may not want one, but who also need to have living here and being secure and housing facilitated.
Absolutely.
To go back to bed and breakfast just for a second, I looked online this morning and there are still a lot of Gabriola listings on Airbnb.
No, wait a minute, Frank. So we have to stop you there. Not bed and breakfasts. You're talking short-term vacation rentals, right?
I'm talking Airbnb.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the Airbnb can be
It's
both.
a platform that
It's just a platform.
B&Bs. The difference is B&Bs are an allowable use. So it's a home occupation use that is allowed. If the owner lives in the house, you can open up another part of your house and have it as a B&B. What's not allowed in our OCP is that you don't live on the property and you use the whole dwelling to rent out as a short-term vacation. And some of those are listed and they're illegal, frankly.
In fact, quite a few of those are listed, are not yet
Yeah.
legal,
Right.
maybe not be legal. Some of them are legal. They have a temporary use permit and they are totally legal because they've been
Sure.
carefully looked at by a local trust committee to determine, is this an okay neighborhood to have this in? How much water will be used? How much parking will be required? What is this going to do to this neighborhood to have constant visitors in and out all the time? It's a really important issue. It's huge.
Yeah.
actually.
So,
Yes, that's where those people, those single young people could be living,
correct.
I hope.
Yeah, and one of the people who responded to our question about questions suggested that more secondary suites are needed. Is that something that's within the purview of the official community
Absolutely.
plan?
It was already suggested in the housing, Gabriola Housing Matters survey. That was one of the biggest responses after people want to see the protection of groundwater, first and foremost. So don't build where the groundwater can't support it, or you've got rainwater harvesting that can support that. The second was build or allow more secondary suites. And what happened in the 90s is the trustees at the time, not the 90s, sorry, 2010 update. The trustees at the time said, okay, we're going to allow secondary suites on properties over 5 acres. That could have been upwards of 600. Do you know anybody who's been able to build a secondary house for rental in the last 10 years? It's not happening. So incentivizing that kind of thing has not worked. We have to understand, what are people going to be motivated by? People want to look after their grandparents, their children. They want to live intergenerationally. They want to be able to grow their own food. They want to be able to share. And so how can we support networks instead of property ownership that excludes everybody else but the property owner?
And how can we encourage additional dwelling units on properties, perhaps less than 5 acres, if it's suitable, but not have them turn into short-term vacation rentals?
Yeah,
That is where it has to be tightly regulated.
because we have no ability to issue business licenses, and the conversation may be had with the RDN at some point about a servicing agreement, but a big city like Vancouver can control the number of B&Bs and crack down on them because they can issue business licenses.
Wait, don't say B&Bs, say short-term vacation.
Vacation rentals. We don't have that ability, but there is new legislation that may allow the RDN to partner with us in something like that.
So you could address more of these problems at the local trust committee level? Or does it fall to the province and the RDN to do it?
All the legislation works together in a very complex
Yeah.
meshwork. So the regional districts have less powers than a municipality, and we have less powers than a regional district. So we only can make decisions about land use planning, and our OCP will reflect that. It's only land use planning. So we can't do the things that a regional district would be able to put in their OCP. So for that, we have to work with the regional district of Nanaimo to have what would be called service agreements for, if, for instance, we were able to collect the hotel tax to use towards affordable housing, like they're doing in Parksville, Qualicum. There's certain communities that are collecting that hotel tax off of the Airbnb platforms or different ones, and that's gone directly into an affordable housing fund that communities can use. So that we haven't tried yet, and we're seeking support in an upcoming meeting with the RDN. To do
Well,
that kind
we're
of
going to
agreement.
talk about it. I personally am not sure that we should be doing that. I really have to think about this because you have to be careful what you ask for, right? So if I were working in a municipality, I would want that immediately. But I'm not sure that that just doesn't encourage people to think, oh, all I need to do is get a business license and I'll just have an STB or I'll just have a short-term vacation rental or whatever. I'm also a little bit concerned about collecting hotel taxes and then applying it for affordable housing, when in reality, the legal accommodations that we have on Gabriola probably can't really afford that. We don't have very many. And we shouldn't be asking them to put out more money for more regulations when in fact the return on that probably is not enough.
No, it's a good point.
You know, it's just probably won't be enough.
It's a conversation.
But it's a good conversation. We need to look at all the angles.
Right.
We have wonderful cooperation from our regional district with Director Craig. She's been super supportive of things that we feel we need to do. So that will be really helpful to think about. But I think there may be other angles that we can look at too.
For sure.
Good.
Between the two of us, we're pretty creative. So, and we have a lot
I believe that.
we have a lot of incredible input from this community. And I'm really hoping that those voices that don't feel they're part of,
Yeah.
you know, a community plan review, that we will hear from them.
Can I talk about the engagement a little bit more?
Sure, let's talk about that now.
Yes. So I just brought the poster because most people will have seen it, and I'm very excited because we actually had some communications help designing it. So if you've seen this about, it's really it's an exciting time because this local trust committee is trying something that the Islands Trust has never done before, which is we asked for more of a grassroots approach. Like I said, the budget's not huge, but this community is super, super engaged. So we said groups that are already formed or that you want to meet together with friends and neighbors or your parents and tots group wants to get together and talk about your vision for Gabriola. We have an application form and we can give you an honoraria to help with the facilitation or a meeting space. And so that deadline unfortunately closes tomorrow, but we've already had 10
groups that
and
apply.
more are coming in, I've heard.
Yeah.
So this is a new thing where instead of an Islands Trust, the Islands Trust is sponsoring groups that can gather in the way that makes sense to them and talk about your vision. And then that comes back in a feedback form so that we can all feel part of this process together. So
Like it's not a formal Islands Trust meeting, you know, that Toby and I have to arrange and the
so
staff has.
difficult.
It's so wonderful to hear that we've already got at least 10
Yeah.
groups who've
Yeah.
applied for this money so they can meet on their own turf, in their
Totally.
own way. And I'm sure, I think that was just such a great idea.
Yes.
And it wasn't mine.
Yeah.
So now is a time for sort of blue skying, creativity, imagination, envisioning a future.
Yes.
Sounds great. I don't wish to be a wet blanket, but does the OCP, in fact, the current one or the new one we'll end up with, have any teeth, really? One thing I notice in the current one is there's a lot of suggestions to make requests of other levels of government,
Yeah.
and often higher levels of government. For example, there is something in there about restricting flight paths over Gabriola. Well, if my memory serves, one was permitted not long ago, and I do hear it flying over my house every evening.
Yeah.
After midnight.
Yeah.
That's fine. It's not keeping me up or
It's
anything.
not fine, but it's the way it
It
is.
is not the highest form of legislation, let's just say. It is a tool that sets out your plan for your local community, but the Islands Trust is mandated to work in cooperation with other governments. We don't have all the powers to do all of the things. So part of that, working with the RDN, and what you'll see in the OCP is that's an advocacy policy. You can advocate for this, but there's also directive policies, and those are ones that say you must and you should. And what is a little bit challenging in this process is because the policy amendment project, so the Islands Trust policy statement,
For
which
the
is
whole trust
the whole
area.
trust area, has not been updated for at least as long.
30 years.
And we've been going through this process for about 6 years now. And so our policy needs to match up with that as yet unfinished Islands Trust policy as well
Right.
as provincial legislation. So it's a bit of a, we're piecing everything together, but we're starting the process with the community to say, well, what do you want? And then we see how it fits with all the other larger pieces of legislation we have to meet.
And the official community plan too, Frank, is the guiding document for the regulatory land use bylaws. And those are what have teeth.
Right.
And, they generally do have teeth. So that of course will come out of, after the official community plan.
That comes
is finished.
after. So the LUB is the technical, the land use bylaws is the technical bylaws that this is the law,
Yeah.
right? And so but you can't create a bylaw that contravenes your policies. So you have to have all the policies there first, and then from that, the bylaws are drafted.
Well, I think perhaps we can leave it there for now. Maybe we'll follow up with you as the process continues, see how it's going, see how you're going. Thank you very much for taking the time to do this. And we all hope a lot of people will get involved in the engagement process that is starting up now. And how can they do that?
islandstrust.bc.ca/Gabriola Visioning 2050. So there's a project website. So if you go to the website, there's a form on there. I believe the survey has gone live where if you don't want to participate in anything on the ground, you can fill out a survey and tell us what you love about Gabriola, basic questions about who you are, what you value. And so that's going to be online until February. And you can write in with a long paragraphs of your vision for Gabriola if you're the kind of person who wants to do that from home.
And Toby and I are good at reading long paragraphs. And
Yes.
perhaps by the next time we meet with you, Frank, we will know if our $77,000 budget request has been approved.
Keep your fingers crossed, people. Thank you again.
Thanks, Frank.
Okay.
Thank you.